Hi, this is Andrea Kane, and I'm here with you for HIT 445, Quality Management. We are on week 1. This is chapter 2, which is the second lecture video for this week. There will be a total of 4, and we are going into defining a performance improvement model. If you are following along in your book, you'll want to be on page 23. Our learning objectives here are to see the cyclical nature of performance improvement activities, meaning there's a cycle to them. They keep going and going and going and going. Define the terminology and standards that are common to PI activities. Talk about organization-wide PI activities and team-based. What's the difference between the two? Some similarities, some differences. Apply an organizational-wide PI cycle, see how that goes, and use the team-based performance improvement cycle. So some terminology here is QA, TQM, QI, CQI, QM, PI. Make sure that you know what these abbreviations are, and then you'll learn what they mean as we go along. And so we'll be starting on page 24. Before I go on, each of these terms represents a quality and PI model or methodology that healthcare organizations have used with varying degrees of success. And some of these models are really no longer used, like TQM for the most part really isn't used. CQI is still sometimes used. PI is the most common. And some organizations use them interchangeably. Some people talk about quality improvement as if it were performance improvement, and others think CQI is the same thing as PI or QI. So don't get too hung up. Just try and at least know the alphabet soup here so that they're familiar to you, although I don't believe they're on a quiz. Deming's PDCA cycle. This is one of the most common that you will hear about. PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. Make sure you know what PDCA stands for and make sure you understand what this cycle is. This is figure 2.1 from your book. So P is plan the change, D is do or test the change, check is check or C is check or analyze the test, and A is act on the results of the test. And it's also sometimes known as PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act. So instead of check, sometimes people use the word study instead. And they're the same model. They're essentially the same things. This model is based on the assumptions that PI activities will take place continually, that services, processes, and outcomes can always be improved. And it shouldn't be treated as a goal that's accomplished and then forgotten, but rather an ongoing mission that guides everyday activities. Are we always improving? It's sort of that 1%. Are we doing 1% better today than we did yesterday? Or, okay, we've been using this process for 6 months or a year. What can we do to improve this process? Where are we running into issues? Can we assess it again and make sure that this process is all that we need it to be? Or has the standard changed so we need to plan, do, check, act again, or plan, do, study, act again? And this is where it gets into a cyclical process. So you identify your performance measures, you measure performance, you analyze, compare internal, external data, identify improvement opportunities, you put actions into place. You check those actions through ongoing monitoring to see if you're meeting what you needed to meet or if you need to tweak it again, and then it keeps repeating. And this is figure 2.2 from the bottom of page 25. And one of the things you notice about monitoring performance through data collection here, or organization-wide performance improvement, is that you're comparing internal and external data. You're taking a look at what's happening internally in the organization, and you may be benchmarking it with external data against other organizations or against a standard. The team-based improvement process, this is figure 2.3 from the top of page 26. And it's very similar. You identify your improvement opportunity, you research and define performance expectations, usually looking at standards or benchmarking again. You design and redesign your process, you do education, you implement that as well as the education. You monitor it or you gather data about it, you document and communicate the findings. Then you go back and you see, are we still where we need to be? Have expectations changed? Are we not meeting expectations? Do we need to do design, redesign again? And so it keeps on going. In figure 2.4, which is in your book, this is a PI model where it's got the organizational on the outside and the team process on the inside. Putting those two together. Performance measure is a quantitative tool that provides an indication of an organization's performance in relation to a specified process or outcome. And so it's usually a rate, a ratio, an index percentage. You use that performance measure to say, yes, we're doing what we need to be doing, or no, we're not meeting it and something needs to change. Benchmarking is where you compare your organization's performance to that of similar organizations. And this is on page 27 in your book, 26 to 27. So you have the numerator divided by the denominator, and this equals the quotient. For those of you who are in HIT 452, we just went over this, so it couldn't have come at a better time. The numerator is divided by the denominator. And the numerator is the number of times it actually occurred divided by the denominator, which is the number of times it could have occurred. So actual over potential. So you have number of patient records with appropriate documentation divided by the number of patient records reviewed. And this gives you that graph. And so you can see they've set here an internal benchmark. And that's what this dotted line is across here. The external benchmark is the solid line. And then they've checked, they've done these audits, and they've plotted them against it to see where they are. Are they below both? Have they risen above one? Did it get as high as going over the other? And that sort of thing. So this gives you an example of how they use the organizational and team process to tackle a specific issue. And it looks like, going back here, it's the employee turnover rate. So they took this data and now they're moving it through this process. And they give you little notes about it that you can read through how they did that. So their goal is to reduce nursing turnover rate. And so how are they going to do that? Because if you go back here, they feel like the nursing turnover rate got higher than their internal benchmark. It didn't exceed the external benchmark, but it's exceeding the internal benchmark, and they want to bring it down. So that's where they're identifying their opportunity and they're starting the process. Systems thinking. This is on page 30. It's viewing an organization as an open system of interdependencies and connectedness rather than a collection of individual parts and professional enclaves. And I will tell you, you need to have this. If you are involved in leadership whatsoever, you have got to have systems thinking in this day and age. You've got to be able to see the interrelatedness as a whole and look for patterns rather than just snapshots. We talked about data silos in a class that we had in the fall that had to do about health information systems. You can't have data silos in an organization where there is truly interdependencies and connectedness when it comes to performance improvement. So systems analysis tools. On page 31, there's a table at the bottom of that, table 2.1, and it goes through all of these. And it lists them out. It gives you the tool, the example, and the application. And I'm going to refer you here and ask you to look at that in your book. I'm going to tell you that you need to know these and be familiar with them. So let's move on here to performance improvement frameworks. And this is on page 32 in your book. Six Sigma is the first one we're going to cover. And this uses statistics for measuring variation in a process with the intent of producing error-free results. So you're always talking about standard deviations. When you're talking about Six Sigma, you're looking at eliminating errors. And it goes through here and it describes this for you. So I'm again referring you back to your book for that. Another performance improvement framework you may hear about is Lean. I've used Lean often in healthcare. It works very well. It's a quality improvement technique, and it is looking for ways to streamline processes, and it looks for waste in 7 areas: overproduction, wasting time, waste of stock on hand, waste of movement, waste of defective products, waste in transportation, waste in processing. I'm going to tell you right now, you need to know Six Sigma and what it is, what it means, what it does, Lean, what it is, what it does, and all of those types of waste, eliminating waste. You also need to know what Lean Six Sigma is and how that's a combination of Lean and Six Sigma. It has the attributes of Lean, of eliminating waste and removing unnecessary steps, but it also has the pieces of Six Sigma to improve accuracy and reduce variation. So make sure that you know the differences between those three. And then there's high reliability organizations, and that's at the bottom of page 34. And that's where they operate under trying conditions and persistently have fewer than their share of crises. They've learned how to manage unexpected change, and knowing that it sometimes can be prevented or at least anticipated or even prepared for. And this is only wise in our world today. Make sure you know all of those definitions and what they mean and what those organization processes look like. Okay, so I covered Six Sigma. It's here on your slides. Talked about Lean. You need to know what all of those wastes or overproductions and overuse, underuse, those types of things. Lean a little bit more. And then Lean Six Sigma, how it uses pieces of Lean and Six Sigma and which pieces it uses. And then what HROs are. And how they are very proactive and try and make things as good as they can be ahead of time to reduce mistakes and errors. All right, that is it for Chapter 2. I will be back shortly with Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, all for week 1. Thanks so much.